I'm going to present briefly the results of two studies that we did, my doctoral student Domingo Valero and I, concerning different psychological and social career resources and their role in facilitating the transition from school to work, or more precisely from school to vocational education and training. And specifically we looked at motivation, hope, role models and social support. So briefly, the context, the study was conducted in Switzerland. And in Switzerland, the vocational education and training is a big part of our educational system, similar to Germany, but possibly even more important because almost 2/3 of adolescents continue vocational education training. This does not mean these are not adolescents that didn't succeed. There are very high levels of vocational trainings that one can do. International studies show that Swiss apprenticeships sometimes have a higher level than the bachelor's degrees in some European countries. So they go up to a very high level in vocational training that they do after they leave school after 9 mandatory years. They are from 2 to 4 years, depending on the complexity of the training that they do in over 200 different kinds of apprenticeships. So this is a huge thing for many, many adolescents in Switzerland, very important for our country to make sure that this transition goes smoothly. And we were interested to see what kind of resources would facilitate this transition in terms of later well-being at work, but also performance and other aspects. And focus on some of these here. This is a larger project funded by the Swiss National Foundation, and these are two of the studies that we did, among others that we're still about to do. The first study was on motivation and hope in that regard. The motivation is something that is often spoken about. You hear practitioners, teachers are talking about motivation, how it's important to be motivated for work. It's psychologically quite a complex construct. You can attack motivation from very different angles. There's not one motivation variable, but there are different views of how motivation can be conceptualized. Often it's quite simplistic. There's only one perspective. For example, self-efficacy, which is an important part of motivation, but motivation is more than just self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the belief that you think you're capable of coping with challenges in some task, that you're able to perform some tasks that are expected of you. And in this study we used a more complete model than just a one-dimensional model. And we used a model of proactive motivation from Parker and colleagues. Similar model has been proposed by Ford, which really combines different research results into one model. And this model has 3 components of motivation. One is goals. This is called the reason to motivation in that model. Autonomous goals mean, why are you doing something? Are you pursuing your goal because you really think you want to do it, because it's fun and interesting and you think it's important? Or are you pursuing your goal because you feel obliged, or you would feel guilty if you don't do it? These are very different motivations of how you pursue a goal. And we're looking at autonomous goals, which means the degree to which you pursue a professional goal because you really think it's important, and not because you think you have to. This is one part of motivation, why you do things. The other thing is occupational self-efficacy beliefs. It's called can-do motivation. So you believe you're capable of doing it. It's a very important part of motivation. If you don't think you can do it, you're not very motivated to pursue a goal. Occupational self-efficacy refers to the belief that you're capable of managing challenges at your work. And then finally, affected work. This is also called the energized to motivation. How do you feel in relation to an activity? Do you feel positive, excited, or do you feel anxious, depressed? This is a large difference in your motivation. So emotions also play a role. And in this study, we assessed all of those 3 to have a more complete view on motivation. And we were interested in how these motivational factors are related to some outcomes. This is the model that we tested with 590 apprentices in the first year of vocational training. They were in a range of different trainings, so not just one. I think we had 9 different, ranging from electricians up to nurses, so quite a range. And we were interested, in the outcomes here on turnover intentions, which means to the degree to which an adolescent thinks, I think about stopping this training, I think about quitting. and performance, job performance as evaluated by the supervisor. So we asked the supervisors, we didn't get data from all this 590, but from 120 supervisors who rated their apprentice on a performance measure. And we thought that these three motivational variables affect how positive you feel at work, so the emotions that they report, the all questionnaires that we used here. Goals, they were asked to state their goals and then to rate why they choose their goals. It's also a standardized measure for this. And occupational self-efficacy also with a standardized scale of how they feel competent or not to master tasks. That these would be related to those two outcomes. And then we also had hope. And the idea was that hope might lead to a higher motivation, so motivation would mediate some of the effects of hope on these outcomes. This is a cross-sectional study, so it's always difficult to talk about mediation, because this means more causality, which we cannot really show, but the theory behind is that hope would be more personality thing more, and motivation is more changeable, so this would mediate some of the effects of hope. Hope, to explain, hope is not what we usually mean or what we often mean when we talk about hope, when we say, I hope for the best, I hope this will turn out fine. This is what in psychology is called optimism. And this is not hope in the psychological terms. So optimism is a positive outcome expectation. You think in the end it will be okay, I don't know how or why, but it will be alright. This is optimism. And hope, in the sense that it's mostly used in psychological research and also in our study, is you believe or you see ways to your goals and you believe that you're capable of pursuing them. So I know how to get there and I believe I can do it. If you have those two, you're hopeful. And you're hopeless if you think, I don't know how to get there and I couldn't do it anyway. This is hopeless. So optimism is not the same as hope. And here we're talking about hope. So people will think, I see ways how to achieve my goals and I believe I can do it. Now this is also already the results. I make the presentation a little bit light. I don't present statistics, but there are statistics behind this, but I don't have it here. So hope was related to all three motivational variables. So students who report more hope had higher values in all of the motivations. And then motivation in terms of affect and goal were related to the two outcomes, not self-efficacy. It was correlated, but here no longer, because it correlated also with the other motivational variables, so it did not add something in addition to the other two variables. So that's why self-efficacy is not related. On a correlation basis it is, but here there are regressions, so it cancels it out. The strongest effect was for affect. It was quite interesting. So the most important motivation variable here was how positive they feel at work. This was the strongest predictor of both outcomes, of their performance also interestingly, and of their turnover intentions, maybe a bit less surprising. But we found this quite interesting, that apparently how adolescents feel at work is an important part of their motivation, and they're less likely to want to quit, and they also have better performance evaluations. So this is the first study. The second one was on role models. Something that also you hear a lot about in everyday life, but there's not a lot of research on this. And we wanted to see what role models play in the transition and how they add or not to social support. Social support, as you know, is another very important variable that is often researched. Social support can mean emotional support. Some people, they support you by encouraging you, or it can mean really practical support. They do something for you. So this is a lot of research on social support, but not so much on role models. And the interesting thing about role models is they're not necessarily support. Maybe this person doesn't even know you, right? I can have a role model that doesn't know that I exist. So I don't receive any social support from that role model. It's more a psychological thing, really. This is a definition of what role models can be. So people who provide an example of success that I would like to achieve. And we assumed that role models should be a beneficial factor for career transitions beyond social support. And we investigated work-related engagement years outcomes on 2 samples. I'm going to explain this a bit more in detail later. And we assumed that occupational self-efficacy would mediate some of those factors. So if you have role models, and if you are more receive more social support. You should be higher in your self-efficacy beliefs in your work, which then should result in more work-related engagement. This was our theory, a bit based on the social cognitive model. We also had in the study that we compared migrant adolescents from native adolescents. This might be interesting because there's some research showing that role models can play differently for immigrants and for native people because they have different role models. So for immigrants, sometimes role models are not that useful because they pick role models more often that are less relevant for them. So some research shows that role models are often picked from your immediate environment. So of course you can have a Hollywood star's role model, but most often people pick somebody from the larger social context that they're in. So migrants might more likely pick a role model who is also a migrant, and this might provide less cues about how to succeed in a system like Switzerland, which is not in every country the case that they have something similar. So this was some interest here to see, is this the same for migrant or native adolescents? Here we have also one item of the role model questionnaire. So this is with some self-reports that we measured this. So we just had two samples. One sample was still in school, so they were in the 8th grade, which is 1 year before they transitioned to vocational training, and another group, same as the other, not the same people, but the same context, first year of vocational training. And we found that role models and social support were both significantly related to both outcomes in terms of work-related engagement. Among students, we assessed goal engagement. This is the degree to which they're actively pursuing a goal to obtain an apprenticeship. And we only included students who were actually pursuing an apprenticeship here, because some students do not. So these 191 were all planning to go on to an apprenticeship, and we measured the degree to which they are engaged in preparing for this. And among the apprentices, we assessed work engagement, which is a very common variable in organizational psychology. This is a state of fulfillment, dedication, and absorption at work. So really a positive state at work. These results mean that role models are independently related to those two outcomes beyond social support. So social support is positively rated, but even if you control social support, role models add something on top. And this was quite interesting to find that really role models add something more than just social support. It was only related in the student sample among native youth, as we assumed. So for the migrant youth, the effects were not there. However, in the apprenticeship sample, it was the same for both. So one speculation, really, we don't know, but one speculation could be that for students, it could be this, that they don't have role models that are that relevant, but once they are in vocational training, maybe they have more access to a larger network, and they are more able to pick role models that are more useful for them as well. Now, we did not assess what type of role models they have, we just assessed the degree to which they perceive to have a role model. So we don't know if there are really differences there, but this would be a hypothesis. And occupational self-efficacy was a mediator, but only among the apprenticeships. So there this was confirmed that students who had more role models and social support had also higher occupational self-efficacy, and this in turn was related also to more work engagement. Okay, conclusion. So motivation is important. Hope as a related variable to motivation is important. Motivation in terms of 3 factors: how you feel, why you pursue your goals, and do you think you're capable of doing it, and the results that we had were especially how you feel at work is important for adolescents. And role models and social support are both variables that are significantly related to goal engagement and work engagement. So role models really seem to add something more than just social support, and I think both areas are interesting for future research and offer some ideas for practice that maybe you can also think about, or we can talk about if you have time